This stuff really works. Real Law of Attraction Manifestation Stories by A.D. Ruffin. Chapter 1 Introduction. How many times does something have to happen before it is no longer considered a coincidence? This was the question I asked my friend as I attempted to explain to him my success with the law of attraction. I wish there was a book one could hand out. A book with tons of law of attraction manifestation stories. Real examples. Real evidence. Well, this is it. Vision boards, visualizations, acting as if it is so, lists, scripting. These are just some of the methods that law of attraction experts teach. There are plenty of books out there that teach you how to use these methods. This is not that type of book. There are plenty of books that attempt to explain why these methods work. This is not that type of book either. This book simply provides real experiences of those who have completed these methods and successfully manifested their desires. Chapter 2 My Story. Well, if it's on Oprah, it must really work, right? That was my thought process. Vision boards had Oprah Winfrey's stamp of approval, therefore it had my attention. In 2009 I watched an old recording of the Oprah Winfrey show that centered around a movie called The Secret. This movie was created by Australian Rhonda Byrne, who says that if you follow the philosophy of the law of attraction, you can create the life you want. According to the law of attraction, everything that happens to you, good or bad, you attract to yourself by way of your thoughts and feelings. Sounds a little out there, doesn't it? Just hold on a second and give it a chance. The show included a panel of experts on the topic, one of which was John Ussurf. John Ussurf shared his story of how years after creating his vision board, he unknowingly purchased the exact mansion that was on his vision board and was living in it. This really got my attention. After the show I went to the bookstore and purchased 3 books. 1. The Secret by Rhonda Byrne, 2. The Law of Attraction by Jerry and Esther Hicks, and 3. The Vision Board by Joyce Schwartz. Then I made my first vision board. Everything on my vision board came true. Not everything happened as I imagined. Some things were so awesome there's no way I could have come up with it to even request it. And other things were simply comical. Why did this work? Short answer, I don't know. I also do not care. If you asked me if I believe that manipulating the ingredients in a box of cake mix can produce a cake, then I say yes, I do. I have followed the steps on the back of the box of cake mix and I got the cake. I believe. Now if you ask me what chemicals from the periodic table of elements are involved and how the heating elements in the stove work, I'm going to say I don't know. I will also say I do not care. For my purpose I do not concern myself with that level of detail. Likewise, if you asked me if I believe that your thoughts become things, specifically when using visualizations and vision boards, I would say yes. I have made a vision board, focused on it for a period of time, believed it would work, and everything from the board manifested. I believe. I don't know how or why this works. For my purpose I do not concern myself with that level of detail. If I had to guess I'd say it has something to do with the subconscious mind and it is beyond my realm of understanding. But I will gladly make use of it. Chapter 3 Visualize. Feel plus visualize equals visualize equals feel the excitement and joy, and visualize whatever you want from the perspective of already having it. Stephen Mariani used visualization to lose 291 pounds. Wouldn't it be nice if you could visualize the pounds away? I once read a story in the Huffington Post about a man who did just that. His name was Stephen. Like many of us, Stephen had unsuccessfully tried losing weight countless times. It was when he weighed in at 475 pounds that something in his head clicked. See, Steven was a die-hard Boston Red Sox fan, but he realized that he couldn't fulfill his dream of going to Fenway Baseball Park because there was no way he could fit into a single seat. So he decided to turn to visualization. Steven would visualize himself in different situations: eating dinner, walking through the stands at Fenway Park, finding his seat and sitting down with more than enough room, escorting his daughter down the aisle on her wedding day. Steven understood that as long as you are a physical being, you will have to take physical action. He started working out 15 minutes a day and gradually increased until he reached 40 minutes, which took him about a year. The day finally arrived. A friend offered Steven tickets to a Red Sox game. At this point he was weighing in at 235 pounds. He now weighs 184 pounds. He has lost a grand total of 291 pounds. Cynthia Stafford used visualization to win $112 million in the lottery. Cynthia Stafford was a single mother raising 5 kids and on the verge of losing her home. She wrote $112 million on a piece of paper and constantly focused on it for several months. Her goal was to win the lottery. Cynthia visualized everything from having all the kids around her when she won to the exact shirt she would be wearing. She also visualized being excited that the money had come into her life. She kept the paper under her pillow and also added a copy to her vision board. When the jackpot hit $112 million, Cynthia went and bought the $2 lottery ticket. In May 2007 she won $112 million in California's Mega Millions lottery wearing the same shirt she had been visualizing. See Cynthia share her own story on CNN. Barbara used visualization to get pregnant. Barbara tried unsuccessfully for 5.5 years to get pregnant. Her most recent unsuccessful attempt was using in vitro fertilization, IVF. Barbara decided it was time to try a non-traditional approach, visualization. She said she channeled her focus to her right ovary, which did not respond at all on the previous IVF attempt. She randomly chose the number 4 and visualized 4 follicles growing in that ovary. Surprisingly, when she went in for her sonogram, the nurse told her, "You have 4 growing on your right ovary, and 2 on your left." That was exactly what she visualized. Unfortunately, that cycle did not produce a pregnancy, but she was very encouraged about visualization. So Barbara said she practiced the same visualization technique on her next attempt. She focused on the number 8 for her right side, and 7 for her left. A total of 15 follicles is what she was visualizing. After the sonogram, the nurse told her, "You have 8 growing on your right side, and 7 growing on your left." The doctors ended up retrieving 12, 8 were mature, and all 8 fertilized. They immediately froze all 8 with the intent of transferring them later, once Barbara's body was in the best shape to be receptive. When the time came, unfortunately, only 5 made it through the thaw, and of those, 3 of them were not good quality. The other 2 were showing better quality but were slow. Barbara's doctor decided to transfer all 5, saying that he believed that even though the lower quality ones had little to no chance, they send signals to the others and push them along. Barbara decided to visualize the process happening and the other 2 growing and implanting. A few days later Barbara was tested. The nurse called her and told her she had an HCG of 167, and that she was pregnant. She shares her own story here on CircleBoom.com's testimonial section. Oscar winner David Seidler visualized his cancer away. David talked to CNN about what happened when doctors informed him that his bladder cancer was back. Instead of removing all parts of his bladder and chemotherapy, David decided to have just the cancer itself removed. The doctors booked him an appointment for surgery 2 weeks later. At the time David was going through a divorce, and when he told his soon-to-be ex-wife about the surgery, she gave him an idea. She said, "Well, what happens if in 2 weeks they go in and there's no cancer?" Initially David just thought she was in complete denial, but later on he reflected on her question. He figured he had nothing to lose, so for the next 2 weeks David spent hours visualizing the nice, cream-colored, unblemished bladder lining. Then David went into the hospital for the operation. A week later the doctor called and said, "I don't know how to explain it, but there's no cancer there." The doctor was so confused he sent the tissue from the pre-surgical biopsy to 4 different labs and they all confirmed the pre-surgical tissues were cancerous. David's cancer had disappeared. Taylor Stevens visualized her way to a book cover. Taylor was a stay-at-home mom living paycheck to paycheck. She wrote about her story on coachingearlyworks.com and talked about how one day she stopped for a second in front of a bookstore window near her home. She wanted to see if it was possible to visualize what it would be like to actually have her name on a book. The only thing could remember was standing in front of the bookstore window visualizing. "I took away the author's name on the book closest to me and put my name on the cover instead. I had no idea what book one looked at, no recollection of the title or which author's name was on the cover." She started to visualize what life might be like if this were actually true, and she started to cry. At the time, Taylor did not know the steps it would take in order to make this happen, but she visualized the end result. Her vision became her reality and she became the author of The Informationist. Billy Mills visualized himself to an Olympic gold medal. Billy was overwhelmingly the underdog, but he had the goal of being an Olympic champion. He was virtually unknown. He had finished second in the U.S. Olympic trials. His time in the preliminaries was a full minute slower than his opponent Clark. In the Olympic finals, with 2 laps to go, only 2 runners were still with keeping up with Clark, Gamuaudi and Billy. On paper, it seemed to be Clark's race. He had run a world record time of 28:15.6, and neither Gamoudi nor Mills had ever run it in under 29 minutes. As they reached the final lap, Billy and Clark were running together with Gamoudi right behind them. Then Billy pulled out to lane 4 and sprinted to the finish line. His winning time of 28:24.4 was almost 50 seconds faster than he had run before and set a new Olympic record for the event. Billy Mills prepared his body and he also prepared his mind. In the years and months leading up to the final, he visualized winning the race dozens of times each day. He talked about his own story and shares his diary in an interview on YouTube. His running diary was filled with positive affirmations and self-talk. In post-race interviews, Billy pointed out his diary entries that reference his visualizations. He described that in the last 150 meters of the race, his mind kept repeating the "I can win." With 30 meters to go, while still in third place, his mind was already telling them, "I won. I won. I won." And 3 seconds later, he did. Marilyn King trained for the Olympics by using visualization. Marilyn competed in the women's pentathlon, which is all-around track and field competition. She was a 2-time Olympic athlete and had many accolades. She shared her own story on NBC News. During the summer of 1979, Marilyn was in an automobile accident. As a result of this, she was bedridden for most of the 4 months leading up to the U.S. Olympic trials. While she was stuck on the couch, Marilyn's training consisted of watching films of successful pentathletes. She visualized herself in very vivid detail going through each of the events. Although she could not physically train, she used the power of her mind. About a week before the trials, she was finally able to physically practice the events. Marilyn went to the Olympic trials and competed against some of the greatest athletes in the world, really having only used a technique of visualization to train. The results: Marilyn King placed second and made the U.S. Olympic team. Chapter 4, Write your vision, make it plain. Scripting and lists. Write out exactly what you want in as much detail as possible. MMA fighter Jon Jones. Before his championship fight, UFC champion Jon Jones was already signing his name as champion 2011. When asked about it before the fight in this interview with LOA, Jon Jones said, "I believe in the law of attraction. I believe you can speak things into existence. When you know what you want, the universe has a way of stepping aside for you." Jon went on to win the fight and become the youngest champion in UFC history. Rapper Soulja Boy. When rapper Soulja Boy was in high school, he had a notebook that he used to write down his life goals in. Some of his goals were: invent the dance everyone would do, get a record deal, have a #1 song, and have a platinum album. He discussed his own experience in several interviews, including one with http://bighustle.com/ where he describes what happened when a classmate found his notebook. Soulja Boy also describes how you can speak things into existence in this interview on YouTube. A year after writing things down, everything he wrote came true. Over 400 million views on YouTube. Over 5 million downloads of the single, Crank That, Soulja Boy. 7 weeks atop Billboard's Hot 100 Singles chart, and platinum status for his debut album SouljaBoyLM.com. Actor Bruce Lee. Bruce was big on setting goals. In January 1969, Bruce Lee wrote a script of what he wanted his life to be. He wrote, "My definite chief aim, Bruce Lee, will be the first highest-paid Oriental superstar in the United States. In return, I will give the most exciting performances and render the best of quality in the capacity of an actor. Starting in 1970, I will achieve world fame, and from then onward till the end of the 1980, I will have in my possession $10 million. I will live the way I please and achieve inner harmony and happiness." His daughter shared some of Bruce Lee's writings in this video on Bruce Lee's YouTube channel. A few years after writing his goal, Bruce Lee's film Enter the Dragon was released and brought in over $90,000,000. Entrepreneur Sarah Blakely. Sarah Blakely created Spank, a hosiery company that specializes in undergarments and bodysuit shapewear. Before she was a billionaire, Sarah worked for Danka selling fax machines door-to-door in the Florida heat wearing pantyhose. She tried to find pantyhose that didn't have seam toes and that didn't roll up a leg after she cut them, but she couldn't find any. She eventually decided to invest her life savings of $5,000 and move to Atlanta, where she researched and developed a hosiery concept predominantly on her own. Sarah shares her own story during a presentation at the Women's Leadership Exchange. She attributes her success to creating a vision and writing it down on paper. Her list included: be self-employed, invent a product that could be sold to lots of people, and generate money without actually being there. Spanx is now in all the top retail stores. Sarah took a simple idea, footless pantyhose, and turned it into a billion business. Chapter 5. It was on my vision board. Vision board, a collage of pictures and words that makes you happy. Travel all over the world. My intent was simple. I wanted to travel all over the world, so I placed a picture of an airplane circling the globe on my vision board. Before I knew it, I was on my first flight to another continent, Asia. Yes, to say it was a trip of a lifetime would be an understatement. I spent 7 days in Singapore and 3 days in Bali, Indonesia. Little did I know this was only the beginning. 6 months after my trip to Asia, I traveled to Durban, South Africa. 6 months after that, I traveled to Paris, France. I'm from a very small town in Alabama, so small that there are no traffic lights and no stores. I do not know anyone who has traveled like this. In my case, I think it was good that I was generic with my request. I could have never picked the locations that I had the opportunity to visit. Career ladder. I had a great career by some people's definition, but not by mine. I worked for a large, stable company, in a salaried position with full benefits, but I wanted more. My complaints were the same as most: underpaid, underemployed, and at one point I even had a manager who refused to speak to me. She would silently walk by my desk, go into her office and email me. When she failed to give me a performance review, I knew I had to leave. No performance review meant no argument for a promotion. Nothing I was doing was being documented. There was such an overwhelming sense of dread going into work. I wrote the word "temporary" on a post-it note and stuck it on my computer screen. I used up most of my vacation days. But instead of going on vacation, I spread them out and used them one at a time for what I called mental days. I remember telling my family member, "This ain't living." My coworker and I would go to the park every day at lunch, and they would have to give me a pep talk so that I would actually go back and finish out the day. I couldn't imagine being there for years. I knew what I wanted. I wanted a new job with a new organization. I wanted progress. I wanted to climb the ladder of success that everybody talks about. So I put a picture of a woman in a business suit climbing a ladder on my vision board. It worked. A short time later I got an interview with the federal government. And then they made me an offer. But that's not all. I knew nothing about the government setup. I had never worked in that area and didn't know anyone else who had. I had no idea that they refer to their positions as career ladder positions, and each year you get a step increase. I was floored. The position I accepted was just what I needed at the time. I was there for a couple of years, and every year I was there, I got a promotion. White space. I like for things to be symmetrical. Back when I made my very first vision board, there was a blank area without a picture, so of course I felt I needed to add one. So I looked through the magazines I had at the time, and there was a picture that was the perfect size. Never mind that it was a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge, it was the perfect size for the blank space. You should remember from my previous story, Career Ladder, that I accepted a new job. Well, 3 weeks after starting, they informed me that I would be traveling to where? San Francisco. And it didn't stop there. The setup of the organizations was, Alabama was the location for the project managers and business analysts. Washington, D.C. was the location for the business owners, Philadelphia was the location for the software testers, and San Francisco was the location for the software developers. This means I had to travel from Alabama to San Francisco quite often. Chapter 6. Ask, Believe and Let Go. Oprah in the Color Purple. You can watch Oprah tell her own remarkable story here on her own network show. After reading a favorable review in the New York Times, Oprah Winfrey bought and read the book The Color Purple. When she was done, she said, "That is my story. This book is my life's story." She became obsessed. She went back to the bookstore and bought every copy of the book they had and handed them out to everyone she knew. Then she started passing out copies to strangers on the street. This was all before she had the Oprah Winfrey Show. Soon word spread that Steven Spielberg and Quincy Jones were going to do a movie about the book. Oprah started telling everyone that she was going to find a way to be in the movie. One day, out of the blue, she got a call from the casting director. He was casting for a movie named Moonsong. Oprah asked the casting director, "Are you sure it's not The Color Purple? Because I've been praying for The Color Purple." He said no, it's Moonsong. Oprah decided to go to the audition anyway. Once there she read the script and quickly realized that Moonsong was indeed the story The Color Purple. Not only was she auditioning for The Color Purple, she was reading for a major role, Sophia. Sophia was married to a man named Harpo. Harpo is Oprah spelled backwards. Oprah didn't hear anything back for months, so she decided to give the casting director a call. He told Oprah she had no experience and that real actors were auditioning for the role. She was devastated. She convinced herself that she wasn't going to get the role and that the reason was because she was fat. So Oprah left home and went to a fat farm to lose weight. While running around the exercise track by herself on one day, she started praying to God out loud. She prayed over and over to God saying, "Please help me let it go." Then she started singing, "I surrender all to thee my blessed Savior, I surrender all." She sang and prayed and cried, and she sang and prayed and cried, and she sang and prayed and cried. Then she felt herself let it go. And in that moment, someone came running out to the track and tells Oprah, there's a phone call for her. Oprah went to answer the phone and on the other end of the line was Steven Spielberg. He said, "I hear you're at a fat farm. If you lose a pound, you may lose this role." The next day Oprah went to Steven Spielberg's office and was offered the role of Sophia in the movie The Color Purple. Chapter 7 They Weren't Always Celebrities. Actor Jim Carrey. Before he was famous, Jim Carrey would use visualization techniques. He talked about his own story while on the Oprah Winfrey Show. He would park his car on the famous Mulholland Drive every single night and visualize having directors interested in him and people he respected saying, "I like your work." Jim Carrey wrote himself a check for $10 million for acting services rendered and dated it for Thanksgiving 1995. Then he placed the check in his wallet and kept it there. Just before Thanksgiving 1995, Jim Carrey found out he would be receiving $10 million for his role in Dumb and Dumber. Olympian Michelle Phelps. Michael had an interview with the Washington Post and he talked about his experience with visualization. He talks about visualizing every potential swimming scenario and visualizing each scenario from multiple perspectives. He has been visualizing since he was young, watching what he calls his videotape of the perfect swim in his mind each night before going to sleep. He is the most decorated Olympian of all times. Entrepreneur Chris Gardner. Chris grew up in foster homes and spent time in jail before he became a successful entrepreneur, as depicted in the Hollywood film, The Pursuit of Happiness. You can watch him tell his own story here as a speaker at the IA Summer Leadership Academy. He had no college degree, only a high school diploma. He was emotionally and physically abused by his stepfather as a child and was occasionally placed in foster care. He became a single parent who was at times homeless. He had to shuttle his son from daycare to homeless shelters. In extremely desperate times, Chris slept under his desk at work. At one point, he and his son had no choice but to sleep in a subway station bathroom. One day in a parking lot, Chris met a man who was driving a red Ferrari. Chris wanted to know what he did and how he did it. The man said was in the financial services industry, making a great living by mostly talking to people on the phone. At the time they met, Chris was selling medical supplies, driving all over town and barely getting by. He thought, I can talk to people from a desk in a nice office, avoid parking tickets and get the car of my dreams. That's what I want to do. That encounter helped Chris visualize what he wanted from a profession. And from that point on, Chris held on to his vision. Today Chris Gardner is the head of his own international holdings company with offices in Chicago and New York. Pro golfer Tiger Woods. Tiger started using visualization techniques from a very early age. He uses the power of his mind to form images and visualize exactly where he wants his golf ball to go. He talks about his own experience in this television interview I found on YouTube. He is now one of the most famous and successful golf players in the world. Professional bodybuilder actor Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold has used visualization techniques since he was a child. You can watch him tell his own story in the Arnold Schwarzenegger Blueprint interview. When he was starting out as a bodybuilder, he used to visualize what it would be like to win the title of Mr. Universe, and then he acted as if he had already won it, which he did a few years later. Conclusion. So do you need more real manifestation stories? Would you like thousands more, all neatly categorized by subject areas? If so, visit http://thesecret.tv/stories.